Hello, I'm Roberta Winters, President of the League of Women Voters of Radnor Township, and I'm back with you today to speak to you more about the issue of adolescent sleep needs. As you recall, the League was involved in promoting earlier start times in Radnor Township and has expanded our outreach through the Regional Adolescent Sleep Needs Coalition, which now involves people from Delaware and also New Jersey. We are working together to mitigate sleep deprivation among tweens and teens because we know it affects their physical, emotional, and social well-being. Regardless of when school will be starting in the weeks ahead, our students will undergo a transition. To help us understand more about this process and how we can help our students maintain and develop healthy sleep habits, I have three amazing women today, all licensed psychologists holding doctoral degrees, who have worked in universities and also in private settings to support those individuals with sleep needs, and are widely published and have developed their expertise through their own specialized consulting businesses. First, I want to introduce to you Jackie Kloss. I've been working with Jackie as a licensed psychologist on the Radnor Sleep and School Start Time Committee. She practices at Bryn Mawr Psychological Associations and is a co-founder of the Behavioral Sleep Medicine Associates, a team that delivers sleep education to schools, communities, and corporations. Jackie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the issue of sleep?
Thanks so much, Roberta. As a clinical psychologist, I've been interested in the specialty of what we call health psychology, which really looks at the mind-body connection. And after an internship with our other guest here, which you'll learn about soon, Dr. Zozula, who supervised me at the time, I learned just how pivotal sleep is to health and well-being and how much we can affect changes in sleep patterns by cognitive and behavioral strategies. So knowing how important sleep is, I've come to realize and learn that sleep is a modifiable behavior, and I'm here today to share some of that information about how we can help sleep and how it can also influence our mental and physical well-being, especially in teens.
Thank you, Jackie. Now, as you've already heard a little bit about Dr. Rochelle Zozula, a board-certified sleep specialist who has been working as a behavioral sleep specialist now for over 20 years. She is a professor of neuroscience at Seton Hall University's School of Health and Medical Sciences and co-program director for training sleep technologists with the Thomas Edison State University. Rochelle is the president of Sleep Services International, an LLC corporation, an educational and technological consulting company for health practitioners. Rochelle, can you tell us also how you got interested in that area of sleep?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for hosting this meeting today. I, as a behavioral sleep medicine specialist, have also come to learn about the impact of sleep and sleep deprivation on physical and mental health, in particular with clients who are children and adolescents. This has a great impact because, as we know, the majority of our children and teens are not getting adequate sleep on a regular basis, and this greatly affects their growth and cognitive development. So the need for having programs such as this to educate the community, to educate the larger United States, and get the word out that sleep is of utmost importance for our young citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. And the third member of our illustrious team today, like Rochelle, is a member of the New Jersey American Academy of Pediatrics Task Force on Adolescent Sleep and School Start Times. Dr. Katherine Dahlsgaard is a board-certified cognitive and behavioral psychologist, and for the last 15 years, she has specialized in cognitive behavioral therapy to treat anxiety disorders in children, adolescents, and young adults. In addition to her practice, Katherine has won numerous awards and honors and also teaches at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Having read many of your articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Katherine, how did you happen to become interested in the area of sleep deprivation?
Thank you, Roberta. I became interested in sort of a backdoor way. I became interested in something of a backdoor way in that I was treating these tweens and teens for anxiety disorders, and I was finding that they weren't getting better. And when I asked them about their sleep and when we would re-regulate their sleep, I found they got a lot better. So I became very passionate about sleep deprivation, and in particular, the issue of why our teens were not getting enough sleep from that.
Well, thank you, Katherine. Obviously, anxiety and loss of sleep are connected, and you've gotten real firsthand experience in that area. Now, during our recent stay-at-home orders, I know many members of the Regional Adolescent Sleep Needs Coalition, which we call RASNIC, notice changes in behavior in their students and their children and our grandchildren. So where did that happen to lead you, Jackie, as a psychologist interested in the field of sleep?
Sure, thanks, Roberta. And one of the things that, as both a parent of teenagers and as a psychologist and having been in this profession for many years, we started observing some distance learning influences on adolescent sleep patterns. And many of you who may be listening right now and experience this in your own homes, we became real curious how different external and internal variables affected our teens and their sleep. So for example, freedom from early alarms, variable virtual start times on school days, some less structured and inconsistent academic schedules, restrictions and changes in social, physical, and extracurricular activities, social and emotional adjustments, newfound stressors, and maybe even for some stress relief that came along with distance learning, changes in meal timing and dietary choices, and increased dependence on technology for social engagement, entertainment, and academics. And one of the things that we started thinking about, well, how does this affect our kids' sleep in both perhaps positive ways, but also in negative ways? And our sense was that this was going to have a significant impact in what we were seeing at home and professionally. So as part of that, we, as a group, and as this has come up as part of the RASNAC, or the Regional Adolescent Sleep Need Coalition, we became real curious. So we decided to do an informal poll about how the sleep patterns might be changing and evolving during the situation. And what we did is, even though this wasn't a large experimental design, it really was meant to survey and guide us in informing us about what's happening with our teens and how can we potentially reach out and help those who might need help, but also learn from this experience in terms of our teen sleeping habits. So just to briefly share, without getting into too much detail, one silver lining, and this is after obtaining a convenience sample of 131 parents and guardians on behalf of 177 of their teenagers, we found that the majority of adolescents, 86%, met the recommended 8 to 10 hours during stay-at-home orders, so almost 9 hours of sleep that they were getting. 81% were more rested, 15% were about the same, and clearly there were strengths and limitations of the study that we noted. It was a convenient sample. They may not have been completely representative. But what we're learning is that when teens, and what we experience professionally and both personally, when teens are sleeping within their own circadian rhythms, they tend to be more rested. So that's one silver lining that we derive from this, and that they were actually doing better on many ways with regard to their sleep. That being said, we're sleeping under very different conditions, as we just mentioned, and there were restraints of early start times and constraints of schoolwork, et cetera, that we might have had earlier. So that got us thinking, how is this going to evolve as we now re-enter with some continued uncertainty about changes in start times and looking at restarting back into the school year when things continue to evolve. And the one thing that we've come to realize through all this is that because we know sleep is such a pivotal part of emotional and physical well-being, and those parts are, and academic well-being, those things are being challenged right now as we enter into the fall. There's still a lot of uncertainty. We still don't know if week by week, if we're going to be virtual, if we're going to be hybrid, if we're going to be in person. And the schedules may be quite a big drastic shift. Our kids might not be having breakfast at noon anymore, and they might be required to be getting up at a more an earlier time to start their day, be it synchronously, asynchronously, et cetera. So we want to really share some guidelines, and that's the point of today, is to share some strategies and guidelines to help us get our kids' sleep back on track. Through this. And we're going to take away what we learned from some of the survey and our experiences during the stay-at-home order, how important it is for kids to sleep during their circadian rhythm, but help kids get back on a rhythm. So what we'd like to do is take you through a number of steps. And if it's okay, I'd like to just jump in and get started with some of the steps that we can take to help get our sleep back on track with our teens and tweens. So the first step is making sleep a priority. So one of the things that we've come to realize is that sleep is as critical to health as diet and exercise. And I think it's real important to share this education with kids and empower adolescents, give them the knowledge to help them make informed choices about their sleep. As I alluded to earlier, teens need 8 to 10 hours on average of sleep per night, as compared to children ages 6 to 13 who need between 9 and 11 hours, and adults who need more between 7 to 9 hours. And this is according to the National Sleep Foundation. So the first thing is really kind of becoming aware of your teen's sleep and having your teen become aware of his or her sleep in order for them to basically take a good look at it to make it a priority of their health. The second thing that we like to teach is keeping, and this is probably one of the most important things in helping us kids establish, especially under this unpredictability and all the changes that they're experiencing, is to help them get on a rhythm. And there's nothing better to help them get on a rhythm than a consistent sleep-wake schedule. So establishing and keeping a consistent sleep-wake schedule, even in the absence of a regular school schedule, is really imperative. And one of the ways we recommend that they do this, even though they might have a whole host of different weekend, weekday, school day, non-school day start times where they're actually required to be somewhere, what we recommend is anchoring the wake-up time around the earliest requisite start time. That's one of the things that will help them develop a rhythm, to develop a consistent, what we call sleep drive, and help them produce good rhythmic sleep. What that means, and this can be a little bit more of a challenge, but avoiding excessive oversleeping on non-school days, late start days, or weekends. So really keeping it within an hour, because that oversleeping could, as you probably experienced in your own lives, if you sleep in until noon on Sunday, it can make it really difficult to fall asleep on Sunday night and wake up at 7 o'clock on Monday morning. So really keeping that rhythm anchored to the earliest start time can be very helpful in getting them back into a consistent schedule. And not only at nighttime and around sleep, but establishing a daytime rhythm as well will help entrain their rhythms to also get on a sleep. So keeping a regular meal times, activity times, we'll get into later non-screen times, physical activity, outdoor activity, all of those things, your daytime activity can also affect your nighttime activity. So that's something we would emphasize as well. And I'm just going to go through a couple more points before I hand the floor over. The other thing, we all hear about dental hygiene, but what we like to emphasize is practicing good sleep hygiene. And we have a few tips for that. So keeping the bedroom environment as cool, dark, and quiet as possible. Elimination of light, especially blue light sources in the bedroom, allows for natural production of melatonin, or what we call the darkness hormone, or the Dracula hormone. What you want is darkness will help secrete the hormone melatonin, which facilitates sleepiness and brings on the onset of sleep. blue light suppresses that. So at nighttime, you obviously want to provide darkness and shutting off those light sources. But in the morning time, you also want bright light to help wake up the brain and suppress melatonin. Again, doing that on a rhythm can help entrain. Things like keeping a noise-free environment will enhance the depth of sleep. Some people may prefer white noise, like a fan going in the background, or there's some white noise machines that can help drown out other kind of stimuli that can enhance sleep. And the other tip is practicing good. We have this term in psychology called stimulus control. And that's the idea of building strong associations between the stimulus of bed and bedroom and sleep. So that's really important because we want to keep all the kids, I think, are feeling a little trapped now. They're trying to get away from their parents. They want some alone time. They find themselves in their room, probably way more than we would hope or want or expect. But if you begin associating the bed with gaming and socializing and stress and homework and schoolwork, that's poor stimulus control. We want the bed to be a cue for sleep. And so we want to keep them doing all those other activities outside of the bed, ideally outside of the bedroom, and having other places to engage in those activities and other kinds of things so that the bed becomes a cue for sleep. And I think that's challenging nowadays, especially with virtual and remote learning, but that's something we want to pay attention to and be creative into other places in the house where they can engage in their schoolwork, social media in a modified way, gaming, etc. And the last one that goes along with this, I would also just like, before I hand this over, is that we want our kids to unplug at night, okay? And maybe even during the day, have breaks as much as we can from screen time. There's going to be a lot of demand on screen time for classwork and socializing. The more we can send some breaks in that, I think is important. And at night, setting electronic curfews, keeping phones and devices outside of the bedroom, albeit a little old-fashioned, using an alarm clock instead of a cell phone. Even the idea that people their friends can be in touch with them and they would respond actually keeps the mind in a much more wakeful state and can interrupt sleep. So really keeping that outside and getting into habits about keeping the devices out of the bedroom can be instrumental. Adjusting displays, and there's great apps for that to turn down blue light like Nocturne or Flux or justgetflux.com on PCs. That can be helpful if they do need to be up later doing schoolwork or whatnot. And even, looking at things like orange color, even though my kids might feel a little goofy wearing them, but at the same time, they're really helpful. And if they're just around family, wearing orange colored glasses with spectrum control technology can also serve as filters. So again, really minimizing these things at night, not only for their light, but also to minimize the amount of psychological activation that gets prompted with these devices. Thank you. So I'm going to hand it over.
Well, I think making sleep a priority is not easy given our wired world and the busy lives that we and our students and children are engaged in. Are there any other habits and ideas that might help, Rochelle, particularly as our students have to think about changing this flexible schedule back into a school routine?
Absolutely. I think in addition to what Dr. Kloss said about practicing good sleep hygiene, something that we need to think about is that when people decide to go to sleep, they think they could turn out the lights and boom, the brain is set to sleep. It doesn't work that way. You need to allow the brain and the body to cool down at night. So coming back to that point, activities that could help you wind down before sleep. Now, you may select certain activities that work for you. They may not work for someone else. So you need to find what helps you calm down and settle down. So things that could be helpful: music, meditation, doing some yoga stretches, doing your old-fashioned prayers, reading an old-fashioned book, not something that is backlit like a tablet or an iPad, but a regular book in sufficient light, but you don't want the light so bright in the room that it's going to disrupt the production of melatonin. A warm bath or shower before bedtime can also be helpful, but that should be 1 to 2 hours before the desired bedtime because you need to allow the body and the brain to cool down. I'm a big fan of using aromatherapy so long as there are no significant allergies for that person. Lavender, sage, vanilla, whatever works to help promote relaxation could be a very, very important function. The other thing, especially with our youngsters and teens, is to limit caffeinated products. Caffeine is a very powerful stimulant. And while it could be very helpful during the day to get a quick fix to wake up, it can have very detrimental effects on sleep later on in the day. And some people are so caffeine sensitive that even ingesting some coffee or tea or one of the energy drinks, which is very high caffeine, these drinks can have an effect 12 to 14 hours after they're ingested. So you have to think about using these products judiciously, avoiding energy drinks, especially in kids that are wired to begin with late at night. You need to really rein that in. And again, some of our kids do unfortunately have habits of using nicotine products, including vaping products. You need to rein that in as well because nicotine is a powerful stimulant. The other part that's hard, as Dr. Kloss mentioned, as we have seen some of our teens drift their circadian rhythm and adopt sleep-wake schedules that really, really fit their circadian drive. What happens in teens, there's a biological tendency for the sleep-wake rhythm to drift later. This is a natural biological tendency, and it further is propagated by their use of all the stimulation in their bedroom environment, all the light sources, particularly blue light. Now, some of our teens have drifted so far during this pandemic that they are virtually nocturnal. They're like bats in a cave. They're in the dark room with the light, their light sources, their electronic devices, and they sometimes have not seen the light of day till noon or 1 or 2 p.m. So we have to help our teens get back on track. The adjustment for the sleep schedule needs to occur before school starts. So if the normal sleep schedule has drifted, if it's been delayed, we need to shift the schedule to earlier times. It needs to start at least 2 weeks before school starts, and it's not easy. So first, you need to have the teen start to wake up 1 hour earlier than they've been waking up. For 2 days, you let them do this. It has to be a very regulated time, no more than 1 hour difference on a weekend. And they must get light right away. So right upon awakening, natural sunlight will be their anchor. You need to open the shades. If even it's cloudy or rainy, there is sufficient light. Then after 2 days, you keep that bedtime, you keep the wake time regular, but you move the bedtime 1 hour earlier. After 2 days, then you shift the wake up time earlier by 1 hour and shift the bedtime by 1 hour. Within about 10 days to 2 weeks, you will anchor the wake up time to what the appropriate time will be. Now, in the evening, you want to avoid light. You want to actually limit the amount of light exposure by wearing sunglasses, especially during the summer months, till about October. So from 5 o'clock on before bedtime, they are to wear dark shades. So that gives you a window of opportunity to achieve light exposure during the day and limit the light exposure in the evening. And that should help them greatly.
Well, if we've got to do that, we've got to start soon because, as you said, that's going to take a couple of weeks before we can get our kids back on track. And speaking of well-being, I know as a teacher, I was always afraid to go back to school. Even that first day of school, I have trouble sleeping and stuff. Katherine, since you deal with anxiety and issues with anxiety, is this normal?
Well, of course it's normal, but I'm surprised to hear you say that. Thank you for being so honest. the time of transition for both adults and for teens is the time of transition can bring up sadness and anxiety. And I think it's important to note that problems with sleeping can make symptoms of anxiety and depression worse. Symptoms of anxiety and sadness can make problems with sleeping worse. But the thing that you have more control over is changing sleep. So the recommendations by Drs. Kloss and Zozula, I think, would be great to help kids during this transition and to help them feel less anxious, less sad, less irritable about the return to school, particularly during this uncertain time.
And I know some people worry if that's normal or not normal to be a little anxious. Are there things that you would suggest that people do if you think, you're a little bit overstressed about all this?
Yes, I would actually suggest that you follow the advice given here, that regulating one's sleep is number one for managing emotional symptoms. The next would be exercise. And then after that, for parents who are concerned about their kids, monitoring, because kids are people too. Kids can be anxious, kids can be sad, but we don't really worry too much that it's depression unless a kid is depressed, sad, irritable most of the day, nearly every day for 2 weeks. And for anxiety, it goes on for a couple of months before they'll meet criteria for a disorder.
Well, thank you so much, Katherine. And on behalf of the League of Women Voters and the many of those who participate in our Regional Adolescent Sleep Needs Coalition, I want to thank you, who's our great audience, for joining us today. And we hope you take the advice of these experts seriously to your heart and prepare your students for the transitions they'll be making whenever and however they return to school. The impact of sleep patterns on their social, emotional, and physical well-being cannot be underscored enough. We are most appreciative of tonight of the time that our psychologists have provided for us, Dr. Jackie Kloss, Dr. Jackie Kloss, Dr. Katherine Dahlsgaard, and Dr. Rochelle Zozula. We are indeed grateful for your support, and we express our continued gratitude to those at MLTV, the Mainline Network, for their expertise in providing the resources for managing this remote format with you today. So we're wishing you all healthy sleep and sweet dreams as we move forward. Thank you.